Thanks a lot, Deepak. This is on. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So thanks a lot, Deepak, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again for this conclave on safe packaging for a better tomorrow. Just seeing this crowd here, and I was mentioning to a few people that we have this crowd here on a working day, and such a senior representation from brand owners, from regulators, from printers gives me a lot of encouragement, and I'm really heartened to see the interest in this subject, because this subject is a subject that really is serious, but also it is something that deeply affects all our lives. So I'm really happy to welcome all of you for this conclave over here. Before we start, I would like to introduce SIGWORK a little bit. I know most of you do know SIGWORK, so I promise you not to take more than 3 minutes. But I think I would like to introduce SIGWORK for those of you who do not know SIGWORK. So this is SIGWORK, yeah? And it says SIGWORK Museum. So obviously SIGWORK is a very old company, because without being an old company, you can't have a museum. So SIGWORK is a 180-year-old company, and it has its roots in Siegburg, Germany. But the good part about the museum is that we keep upgrading it and updating it every time. So it's not something that is sort of standing still in time, but this is something that we are very proud of. We are proud of our heritage of 180 years. Just some numbers over here. We are a 1.1 billion euro company. We have operations in several countries, more than 100 countries worldwide, and we have more than 5,000 SIG workers working across the globe. SIGWORK has a global footprint, so we can call ourselves a global company. So I think it may not be necessary to go through the entire geography, but it is very clear that we are represented in all large economies of this world, both developed and emerging. We are structured BU-wise, so what we believe is that our technologies are meant for customers. So all our orientation is towards customers, so hence we are not structured technologically, but we are more structured from a business orientation and from a customer orientation. So we have flexible packaging, sheet fed, narrow web, tobacco, liquid food, and paperboard. And I'm happy to see that there is representation from all the BUs today over here. SIGWORK is a company that has a strong India footprint. There is a strong commitment to India from SIGWORK. SIGWORK has been in India for the last 10 years. It came into India on the back of an acquisition, SIGPA, and we have a large facility in Bhiwadi, which is in the state of Rajasthan, very close to here. And overall, we employ more than 500 people in India. And as you can see, we have blending centers across the country, which also indicates that we want to be close to our customers. So it's a whole customer-oriented approach that we always want to follow. And this is a large facility. So in terms of land mass, it is the second largest SIGWORK facility worldwide, right? So it is a significant statement of commitment to the Indian market that there is a strong investment in India. As SIGWORK, we believe we are different from our honorable competitors. We are different. And hence, if we are different, then what is our differentiation? Our differentiation is embodied in this diagram over here, but I will not take you and bore you through this, but it's simple towards customer orientation. The whole differentiation is towards customer orientation through top quality products, best in class service, and most importantly, finding solutions to the complex problems of packaging today. So we work with our customers, we work with our brand owners to find solutions to problems of today. So we do not sell products, we sell solutions. And one of the key areas of finding solutions is product safety. And that is why we are all here today. And SIGWORK believes in being the best in class in terms of finding solutions to product safety and regulations. And there are 3 things I just want to mention over here which sort of proves our credentials in terms of product safety. First, Siegburg in Germany is the world's largest ink manufacturing plant in one location, the world's largest. And it manufactures solvent-based inks. This facility is right in the center of a city. And still, we are able to grow, we are able to flourish, and we work extremely closely with the local community. And to an extent that our owners also live in the same complex as where the factory is located. There cannot be a bigger commitment to safety and compliance than this. So that's the first thing I would like to say. The second I would like to say is that in the entire ink industry of the world, there are toxicologists employed, and Sigwork employs 50% of those toxicologists. So that's stretching the fact a little bit, but the point is that there are only 2 toxicologists employed in the ink industry worldwide. And Sigwork employs one of them, and he's here with us today. Thanks for coming, Edward. And third, I would like to announce to all my Indian friends is that Sigwork India will be the first ink company in this country to go completely compliant, toluene-free very soon in 2018. And this, ladies and gentlemen, and this when 90% of the market today is toluene based. So imagine the commitment from Sigwork globally and from Sigwork India to voluntarily say that we do not want to be a participant in the 90% of the market which we believe is not safe. And that brings us to today's subject of product safety. There's one company whom I admire a lot in terms of product safety, and that's Tetra Pak. There are a few reasons why I admire Tetra Pak a lot. Tetra Pak started its India operations in 1998, and from day one it was compliant. From day one. It's the one multinational that I've seen that employed its European standards from day one into a developed or developing emerging economy like India. From day one. And that shows a lot of commitment. And from day one, I'm so happy to share that from day one, Sigwork supplies 100% of the ink requirements of Tetra Pak in India. And the second thing very important to a few of us sitting in this room is that in being 100% compliant, Tetra Pak is an extremely successful financially successful company. So it proves a point that it is not an either or situation, it can be an and situation. So you can be compliant and be financially super successful. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome Kandarp as the MD and CEO of Tetra Pak India as a keynote speaker. Kandarp is a chemical engineer from IIT Kharagpur and a management trainee from management degree from Lucknow. Kandarp has handled several senior positions in Tetra Pak over the last 20 years from Dubai, Lausanne, Italy, and also Sweden. He is currently the managing director for Tetra Pak India and handles South Asia as an entire geography. Prior to joining Tetra Pak, Kandarp worked in organizations like HCL, Wipro, P&G in several sales and marketing positions. He lives in Gurgaon. He has an avid interest in theatre, tennis, golf, and cycling. Kandarp, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Ashish, for that flattering introduction, but more importantly, very enlightening overview of Sigwork. Good afternoon, distinguished guests. It is truly a pleasure for me to stand here and thank you again to Sigwork for inviting me for this keynote. It did not take me more than a few microseconds to accept the invitation because it had the word safety written on it, and that's something that excites every single person in Tetra Pak today, not only in India but elsewhere in the world, because safety is at the heart of our vision that reads, we commit to making food safe and available everywhere. So, you know, what I will do in the next 20 to 25 minutes is really reflect on the topic that was given to me, which is how do we ensure safety? Is it something that just happens by default, or we just will it to happen and it happens on its own, or something else needs to work? And I'm talking about more of an integrated approach that needs to be taken. Why do I say that? This number could mean many things to many people. It could mean the number of new registrations for GST since July 1st, or the amount of money that's probably flowed back into the system post demonetization, maybe we wish. Or it could mean, as Ashish said, that it could be a good financial bottom line for some companies as well. But this is a number that is very staggering, and that is the population that is going to be in this country by 2030. What does this mean? Of course, we all get very excited when we look at these numbers from an industry perspective, because it means growth. It means more consumption, it means more production, a larger supply. So more, and that's very, very exciting, energizing, inspiring. It also means more waste. One of the biggest challenges we face today is how do we handle waste, and I will come back to this subject later on. It also means what has been happening over the past decade or so particularly is the fact that we are moving away from a centralized information network to what I would call a distributed information network, where information is available at our fingertips today. While that is a phenomenal opportunity, it also poses tremendous challenges for those who are working in the area of safety. There's also more media scrutiny. There's much more sense of being microscopically examined every time there is an issue that even suggests that there are some safety concerns or lapses in safety on the part of the industry. And finally, there is more regulation, right? And for right reasons, of course. There is more regulation, there is a desire to make sure that there is regulation and legislation that ensures that food is made safe for consumption. In this landscape, it is very important that we don't look at safety lightly, because we have seen it before. It has been called out earlier in the introduction. It can cause irreparable damage to a company's brand name and reputation, both of which can take years, if not decades, or never to recover. So this is a very, very serious subject, especially when we are talking about a landscape of growing consumption. Now, how do we tackle this? It is very easy for each one of us sitting in our respective areas to say, well, we are okay. Yes, Ashish made a very flattering remark on Tetra Pak, and thank you very much for recognizing that we were fully compliant from day one, and it's not necessarily only coming at an additional cost or the expense of bottom line, because that's sometimes, unfortunately, the assumption that is made in the industry. I think the biggest problem right now is that protecting food safety alone is not enough. It's got to do with also managing how we manage the environment, because that's equally important to secure our future. They are not two inseparable or mutually exclusive objectives or goals that we need to pursue. Protecting and the food safety and the environment requires an integrated approach. This word has been used repeatedly in several forums, several occasions. I have been part of this myself. And it actually is very humbling even for me to stand here and wax eloquent and say I know exactly what that means, because frankly, it is very difficult to get our heads around what a truly integrated approach could mean. So while I could say I am part of one, or we are part of one, we still have some way to go to really make sure we understand and start to integrate all elements of the value chain. When I say value chain, it starts with production, processing and packaging, distribution, consumer, and also at the government and influencer level. We must involve stakeholders in the issues. The biggest challenge I see standing here today is in most cases we end up being in a very reactive mode. We believe we are doing enough, but we're not looking further upstream or further downstream to figure out what those who are connected to us are doing. And in doing so, we do ourselves and the entire industry or the gamut of food safety a big disservice, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why this is the need of the hour, is for us to look across the chain to make sure that we understand what an integrated approach could mean. When it comes to production, just starting with sourcing safe and quality food, it's not enough to say my packaging is safe. 6-layer packaging or many other forms of packaging that can protect the product in a very good way are all great technologies that exist and will continue to evolve in the future generations. But we have learned, and we have learned the hard way in many cases, that you have to look at what's inside the package as well. We as a packaging supplier, as a provider of packaging solutions, have to have a very clear view of what's going to be packed in there. And this has been something that we have seen a focus on, has helped us to ensure that our solutions are actually customized to the extent we can. Milk is a major source of business for Tetra Pak across the world. It started our journey in Tetra Pak more than 60 years ago, started with the packaging of milk. And it still continues to be the core of our business globally. It still continues to be our significant business even in India, and we still have a very, very long way to go. We are just scratching the surface, the tip of the iceberg, as I would say. And one of the things that we have seen is that we must understand the kind of milk that is coming in to be processed and packaged, because that's where the problem begins when there is a food safety issue. So we've had to work with many of our partners in conjunction to make sure that we conduct raw milk quality audits, ensuring that we are clear about the distance that the milk is traveling. Is the milk being chilled before it enters the reception of a plant? And therefore, before it starts even getting processed. So it is extremely important, and this applies to everything that we're talking about, whether it's food or it's juices or any other form of beverage or food that is being packed. The source is extremely important, and many of you may be involved in that part of the value chain. And we as one part of the value chain, talking about processing and packaging, have to understand and recognize that a dialogue with those who actually work with raw milk is equally critical. And the understanding of that part of the chain is equally critical if we were to ensure a consistency in terms of food safety. Let me get to processing and packaging, which is obviously would be a core of our business today, right? And our discussion, our core on food safety and why we get excited and energized and inspired on food safety is because we have a technology, we're working on the back of a technology that drives that agenda in a very clear fashion, whether it's the way we process the product through ultra-high temperature treatment or the way we package it with 6-layer packaging. And that combined provides a solution that is safe, hygienic, and more importantly, does not require chill distribution or storage. So this has been the basic core of our success for the last 60 years across the world, starting in Europe and then moving across to the Americas and now moving eastward for very obvious reasons. Now we could feel very, very good about this and start to actually feel that we've actually cracked the whole code. But that is far from the truth, because what we really need to make sure is that we need to ensure, as we heard about from Ashish, compliant packaging, right? Everything from the polyethylene, the aluminum foil that we use, or the paperboard that we use has to be compliant because it's talking about interaction with food. And last but not the least, the ink that we use. I'm really, really energized and happy to hear that you're moving to the new inks and that you will be able to supply those in the from this year onwards, because I think that is the need of the hour of the industry. Sometimes we are reticent to adopt these solutions because we look at the straight-on cost impact, and that's fair enough. I think all of us have a responsibility for both the top line and the bottom line of our respective organizations where we operate. But what we need to look at is the cost beyond the cost of what we are seeing in front of us, and there's a hidden cost that is much bigger. We have seen enough and more instances in recent years, actually much more in the automobile industry I can see than in the food and beverage, but we've also seen recent times in the food and beverage industry, the cost of what happens when it starts to go really down south and there is a real safety issue and it enters crisis proportions. So we have to ensure that packaging at every level is compliant, and compliance is not a cost. It's an investment. I think we must start to look at that. This is the imperative of the entire value chain. We have to start to look at this in terms of looking at what happens if there's one issue. We talk about in our own circles, when we talk about dairy, for instance, if we talk about milk, what happens when there's one real big issue with milk? Milk is daily part of our diet. It's almost religion to consumers in India, right? And anything that really goes wrong will start to really harm a brand and its reputation. So we have to ask ourselves what if, and not about, hey, you know, this is how much more it's going to cost me, so maybe I'll take some more time to decide whether I should adopt this new technology or not. It's not only around packaging. I think we are talking about processing as well. Many of our plants, and we are working on integrating even plants with much more digital technology than we've ever used in the past. Because you can get fantastic quality milk or a juice or a food product or a vegetable or a fruit into the plant. You can have a fantastic packaging, all compliant. Every element of it is in full compliance, and you feel very good. That's really a good thing to do. But it's also the fact that when you have parameters in the plant which are actually treating the product, and each element of that has to be integrated. And this is very, very important. It is going to become the future. It's extremely important that all solutions that we are working on as solution providers work around integrating those elements, because that's another step towards food safety. Digitalization. This is another word that's been used and will be used for a long, long time in the years to come, because it is going to be a game changer. And I want to give you some examples of how we are looking at this, not just talking about for greater efficiencies or being able to reduce our response times, but also in terms of how we manage food safety. So I have a short film to share with you. Hope it works.
Digitalization is transforming our industry and changing how we work to create new opportunities by leveraging global data from thousands of lines, connecting our field force with equipment, and bringing our expertise closer to you. Sensors on connected Tetra Pak filling lines continuously send information to the Tetra Pak Performance Management Center. Staff analyze the data and proactively make recommendations to improve productivity and eliminate unscheduled downtime. And thanks to digitalization, the predictive horizon is longer, making it easier to plan maintenance to fit production schedules. Our service engineers are equipped with digital tools to support them in their daily work to deliver better service. Apps provide easy access to information needed to perform maintenance effectively, including service manuals and checklists, problem-solving methodology, and the global issue database. With remote support, all service engineers are experts wherever they are, whenever it's required, which minimizes extra service calls. Digital tools are not only for service engineers. With virtual training, operators use computer simulation to learn at their own pace, fitting your competence needs and production schedules. Service engineers use mobility apps to track the maintenance completed and to get sign-off before leaving the site. These are just some of the ways we are using cutting-edge digitalization technology to bring you new opportunities through Tetra Pak services while always protecting what's good.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is actually something that we have just embarked on, right? So this is something very new, it's fresh off the press, and this is something that we're going to drive even more, even harder going forward for all the reasons I've stated earlier, because it has to be about how we get information far more efficiently and real time. Let me switch to the next part of the value chain, which is distribution, something that even for us in Tetra Pak was not necessarily on our radar in the beginning of our journey. And again, we've learned our lessons along the way. But today it's very firmly front and center of our agenda when we talk about developing solutions for the future. So when we looked at testing and transportation conditions, everything down to how a pallet or how products are stacked, how our products are actually stacked before they get to the to supermarkets or the stores is extremely important, and we have to do these well before they leave the warehouses or they leave the plants. This has been a big factor for us. So every solution we provide from a packaging perspective has to start to comply with this further down the chain. So an example of that is the paperboard, and we have a gentleman from ITC, Venki, who we've been working very closely with. The grammage of paperboard we use for our packaging is dictated by some of this, right? Because it has to withstand the rigors of distribution. Now, for many of us, it's a very different landscape here compared to many of the developed markets where you have organized retail that work with a very different set of distribution principles. Here we have a very different setup. We have infrastructural challenges, and our packs are subjected to rigors that are not subjected to many other places in the world. So we've got to work on those lines and work back up the chain to then work with our suppliers saying, we've got to look for a different solution. This does not work for us here. That's an example. We look at, when we talk about beyond that, we're even going further up to improve capabilities. It's not enough to just develop a packaging solution or a paperboard that works. It's also making people aware how you handle packages. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest challenges in packed food for us, in packed beverages, is in this area. Because of the fact of handling the way packages are stacked or thrown into a truck or the back of a van, or one says that the stacking height should be 5 and it goes to 9 because you want to optimize space utilization, and then by the time it gets to the store, it's either crushed or there's a leakage there, and then there's a big issue. So we've got to actually start to look at this totally across the chain to make sure that we can have safe packages on the shelf. And finally, the person that makes the most of the difference, which is the consumer in this case, right? We've got to think of what we are doing. How do we make sure there is a growing awareness, and this trend is irreversible, in my view. This is not a trend that you and I can, or any one of us can say, well, actually we can do something about it, because it's happening as we speak, and it's going to even continue to grow in the future. We've been looking at how do we improve food safety knowledge and information, and we work with a number of ambassadors, we engage with people at different levels to make sure that we are actually ensuring people are aware of what safety means, or what health and nutrition and safety means. But is that enough? We're also busting myths and making sure people are aware of what we are really looking at when it comes to the communication and what we stand for. And finally, when we look at this part, typically, and Mr. Sharma is here, so I can say it in front of him, typically the reaction is, oops, right? There's a sense of, well, here comes the legislation and here comes something that we'll have to fight now for the next 2 years. And I'm saying it in true openness and honesty because that's been the general sense we've had, and sometimes for good reasons as well. I think it's extremely important that this part of the value chain starts to work in tandem. And I can give you an example with pride on the left-hand side, which is the Safe and Nutritious Food initiative that we're actually working with the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India to raise awareness around this issue, right? And this is a very key area where we are talking about food safety being integral to the agenda. I want to pause here when you talk about food safety and our vision going forward. For many years, we've harbored the notion in the industry of an adversarial relationship with the authorities, one that has been defined by waiting for product approvals, not getting them, and then making complaints, or the fact that there's legislation that we don't like. Right? So there's always been one or two or three of these things. I think going forward, there's going to be a big step change here, and I can feel it. I personally can feel it in the corridors of many of these bodies that today are working on regulations. There is a very clear sense that this is a facilitation, this is working in partnership with the industry and not against the industry. And I think that is a huge step forward for us, and I really would see that this will be one of the big game changers or catalysts for going forward. And finally, I mentioned sustainability. It's not good enough for us to continue to say consumption is going to grow, and we will provide, we will work in the value chain, whether it's inks or polyethylene or paperboard or our packages per se. We must make sure we close the loop, because this is also becoming a major challenge. We are running out of landfill space in many of our cities as we speak, so we are doing a lot of work. We must engage across the chain to make sure we can manage what we are setting out there as waste. This is a very important piece of the puzzle, and one that we cannot ignore. So ladies and gentlemen, it's about uncompromising on food safety, but also working on sustainability. Thank you again, and I always say that when I look at the future, I always tell people that the future will always be bright because of all the factors we see where we are sitting. But ladies and gentlemen, it will always be very different, and we better be prepared to deal with that difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kandarp Singh, for emphasizing the need for packaging safety to secure our future, the need for an integrated approach, and most importantly, to improve consumer knowledge about safety. So with those words, I'd like to thank you for starting off our thought process, which will lead us to the next session. But before we close this session, may I invite Mr. Ashish Pradhan to hand over a memento to Mr. Kandarp Singh for being here.
Thanks a lot for coming. Thank you.
So with this, we close the session. We move on to the next part of our program.